Hey, howdy, hi, it's me, Zombie Brian. Welcome back to another video. It's March 1st, and you know what that means.
Oh my god, we're burning alive!
That is correct, Wendy. Get ready to review every single movie I watched for the entire month of February. Definitely not as many movies as I watched in January, which is interesting because it's consistent with last year when I started doing this experiment. It's weird. I somehow start off the year strong with watching almost 70 movies, and then my brain is just like, let's take a break for a second. It's the beginning of the year. Why are you taking a break, dude? All I do is watch movies. It doesn't make any sense. Anyway, whatever. Psychology aside, let's just start the goddamn video, right? Go. The Golden Compass, directed by Chris Weitz. Another epic fantasy world for children with a great cast and a different approach that's not afraid to play with darkness and fun, but poorly aged CGI. Wonka, directed by Paul King. A disarmingly charming origin story where Timothée Chalamet sings catchy songs surrounded by beautiful imagery that I was not expecting to like, much less tear up at. Deja Vu, directed by Tony Scott. An incredibly smart, fast-paced, and engaging thriller with really cool, unrealistic future technology and cliché scientific dialogue set to the tune of The Beach Boys. Fallen Angels, directed by Wong Kar-wai. A weirdly surreal story told through a wide-angle lens and epic gunfights about a hitman who can't find purpose in life other than really liking ice cream. When Evil Lurks, directed by Damien Rugna. A visceral and original approach to the possession genre seasoned with extremely graphic violence and a deeper meaning as to the future of our species. Spies, directed by Fritz Lang. A dangerous romance and tons of rivalries developed with realistic acting and amazing action sequences amidst the greatest spy film of all time. Angst, directed by Gerald Cargill. An absolutely unflinching and grotesque film that tries to humanize a serial killer by showing the brutal honesty of his thoughts and actions with masterful camera work and acting. The Batman, directed by Matt Reeves. Another dark and dank take on Batman, but expert direction and storytelling gives us a slower, quieter, creepier approach to crime fighting instead of flying fists and hero poses. Bachelorette Party, directed by Neil Israel. An over-the-top, hilarious 80s mix of comedy involving family-friendly jokes sprinkled with raunchy behavior and genuine relationship drama interrupted by a donkey show. Harakiri, directed by Masaki Kobayashi. An expertly crafted samurai film that challenges the politics of the feudal era in Japan with rich dialogue, strong camera work, and an effective soundtrack. Shut-In, directed by Farron Blackburn. An unoriginal spooky thriller with a by-the-books musical score and a great cast that borrows several heavy plot points directly from The Shining, but fails to be as good. Narrow Margin, directed by Peter Hyams. A tensed, well-paced thriller that barely had time to start before Gene Hackman did most of the heavy lifting when it came to acting, entertainment, and shocking stunts. Gone with the Wind, directed by Victor Fleming. The quintessential epic love story of the South with masterful performances and unparalleled cinematography that gives a unique look into the soul of the enemy. Fear Clinic, directed by Robert Hall. A decent cast populates this above mediocre and fairly original story that has a cool-looking villain, however too many blinking lights and dull dialogue wound the overall product. Enough, directed by Michael Apted. A quirky thriller that turns into a deadly serious fight for control that makes for interesting tonal shifts and an adrenaline-fueled ending that sees Jennifer Lopez turn into a kick-ass superhero. The Lord of the Rings, A Fellowship of the Ring, directed by Peter Jackson. A grand literary masterpiece of the most epic proportions, expertly and perfectly translated to the screen with real passion and unmatched skill. The Truth About Cats and Dogs, directed by Michael Lehman. A rom-com that shows off Janeane Garofalo's comedic charm and teaches us the importance of following the heart and not the brain. The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, directed by Peter Jackson. The second and my favorite part of the most successful book-to-screen adaptation of all time with a sudden flood of new characters and story arcs that takes everything to the next level. Unaccompanied Minors, directed by Paul Feig. A kids movie for all ages with an impressive cast full of comedic cameos and unrealistically quick developing young love sandwiched with hilarious one-liners. Free Fire, directed by Ben Wheatley. Fun quips, a handful of gory effects, and a wonderful cast populate this 90-minute long shootout that takes place on the ground where everyone ends up in the first 5 minutes. The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, directed by Peter Jackson. The conclusion to the second greatest trilogy of all time with an overpowering runtime but beautiful visuals and performances to distract your full bladder. Scarface, directed by Brian De Palma. An 80s classic considered to be the greatest gangster film of all time with a commanding performance by Al Pacino and all the dumb Cuban accents you could ever want. The Roommate, directed by Christian E. Christensen. Stupid name. A generic obsessive friend horror movie that packs its plot with too many elements that don't pay off but has a very attractive cast and stylish photography. The Iron Claw, directed by Sean Durkin. A powerfully honest look at the cost of real passion and loyalty with undeniable performances and constant depressing moments that makes for a great movie. My Bloody Valentine, directed by Patrick Luzier. A satisfyingly gory remake that stands up against the original with cheesy 3D gags, fun horror alum cameos, but a weird choice for a final girl with Jamie King. The Jacket, directed by John Mabry. An interesting mix between 12 Monkeys, The Butterfly Effect, and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest with an all-star cast and a disturbing sexual undertone. 88, directed by April Mullen. A lame attempt at constructing a Memento-type plot with mediocre shootouts, rushed character development, tons of fake blood, and Catherine Isabel's beautiful face. My Blue Heaven, directed by Herbert Ross. A weird mixture of comedy and drama with Steve Martin's classic comedy blend on display but lacking the true talent of Rick Moranis and Joan Cusack. Miller's Girl, directed by Jade Haley Bennett. A beautiful lesson in film form about the consequences of denying true love and trying to take the path you want by force with incredible incredible performances all around. James Dean, directed by Mark Rydell, a highly condensed and sometimes blatantly incorrect depiction of the life of one of Hollywood's most memorable stars with a pretty uncanny impression by James Franco. East of Eden, directed by Elia Kazan, the first and possibly the best of only 3 movies James Dean did before he left this world, with the biggest impact that any star could ever achieve. Blowout, directed by Brian De Palma, a smart, fast-paced thriller with De Palma's signature filmmaking design on full display, great music, and a lovable performance by Nancy Allen. Scar, directed by Jed Weintraub, a painfully predictable by-the-book slasher that had 2 redeeming qualities with a satisfying amount of gore and the uber-talented Angela Bettis driving in the front seat. Mean Girls, directed by Samantha Jane and Arturo Perez Jr., a pointless carbon copy adaptation of a musical adaptation of a classic comedy from the early 2000s that doesn't need to exist. Man on Fire, directed by Tony Scott. Despite Scott's classic yet annoying, choppy, flashy editing style, the immense performances and incredible story hold this thriller up on its feet to be considered a classic. The Zone of Interest, directed by Jonathan Glazer, a horrifying, if not much-needed reality check about the past and the senselessness of the Holocaust provocatively seen from the enemy's point of view. Sahara, directed by Breck Eisner, a full-blown action-packed adventure with cool fistfights, stylish explosions, Civil War gold, and a fantastic trio of performances that'll blow your hat off. That was good. That's funny. Okay. King Kong, directed by Marion C. Cooper and Ernest B. Schoedsack. Undeniably the greatest monster movie of all time, with pioneering effects, camera tricks, and techniques that still make for an impressive viewing experience. 8 Heads in a Duffel Bag, directed by Tom Schulman. A flat-out, hilarious slapstick approach to a classic mobster story trope that kind of underutilizes Joe Pesci, but sees Andy Como shine in his debut feature film. King Kong, directed by Peter Jackson. A remake that does not surpass the original in spirit and pure passion, but instead showcases the time, creativity, and effects this story always wanted to have. Mighty Joe Young, directed by Ernest B. Schoedsack, a formidable follow-up to King Kong with arguably better camera tricks and effects that sees the legendary Ray Harryhausen debut his stop-motion talent. The Memory Keeper's Daughter, directed by Mick Jackson, an unfortunately too fast-paced story about life, family, regrettable decisions, and the pain of dealing with it incorrectly. Dr. Cyclops, directed by Ernest B. Schoedsack, a disappointing, schlocky, run-of-the-mill evil scientist turns people small movie with standout effects and a cool sci-fi looking costume, but unfortunately nothing else after that. Stonehurst Asylum, directed by Brad Anderson, a lackluster drama with a stunning cast that masquerades as a spooky thriller that gives you the twist up front and then leaves you hanging with another unfulfilling twist at the end. Stalag 17, directed by Billy Wilder, an uplifting look into life in a World War II POW camp with fun characters, well-placed dramatic moments, and an unbelievably spot-on James Cagney impression. City by the Sea, directed by Michael Canton Jones, a subpar cop drama with a stacked cast and good performances all around, but a lame, hollow story and barely any violence. Lost in Space, directed by Stephen Hopkins, an attempted remake of the classic TV show that I think works well with the world-building, atmosphere, and cheesy dialogue coming together to create a hidden gem. Lisa Frankenstein, directed by Zelda Williams, a semi-funny coming-of-age story that punk rockifies the Frankenstein element with classic Diablo Cody dialogue and delightfully gruesome acts of violence. Poor Things, directed by Yorgos Lanthimos, a daring and disturbing take on the Frankenstein story that feels more like a sci-fi version of Barbie with intriguing camera work and a top-notch performance by Emma Stone. Chill Factor, directed by Hugh Johnson, a horrifyingly serious end-of-the-world situation and sometimes shocking brutal violence is brightened by the comedic style of Cuba Gooding Jr. Invention for Destruction, directed by Carl Zeman, the pioneering film in mistimation that has jaw-dropping effects based on a Jules Verne story that also inspired filmmakers like Terry Gilliam. And finally, Uptown Girls, directed by Boaz Yakin. Give me a fucking break. It's the last movie of the... Directed by this guy. It's a story about learning your worth in the world in the form of an odd couple friendship where Brittany Murphy gives one of her most meaningful performances. And there you have it. Wow. What a variety pack of movies, am I right? Also, if you haven't noticed, we've changed locations. I'm now sitting in the corner of my room, which you can't tell in the video, but I'm just telling you in proportion of where my room... Nobody cares. I started doing a horror wall full of posters. There's more on that side, but you can't really see. I have to turn the cam... I don't know, I just thought this would be a cooler place to do videos. So anyway, yeah, what a wild collection of movies. It's very interesting for me to be able to look back on these lists and like see what movies I watched and in what order and when and why. Like it just brings up it is very psychological. It's like it brings up questions as to like, why did I decide to watch this? And all of a sudden you can see like where my brain shifts from like being interested in detective movies and moving on to like superhero shit. And then all of a sudden we're in horror movie territory. It's just weird how my brain works. And you can physically see it with these videos, and I think it's very cool. Anyway, I guess I'll see you next month for all of the movies in March. Until next time, bye!